worked. We need to use the grants equitably. We need to have realistic overflow requirements, and we need to have the best options for outfall or water reuse. And then we can get to work on an option that makes sense. We need to be incremental and not build something that we don't need ahead of time. So I can only say that I can't support this motion coming forward because we have more than enough unrealistic options. What we actually need is to have some experts actually put their signature on a line and say, this is what I could do for you for this much money.
Thank you very much. I have Director Plant, Director Brownoff, and then Director Alto. Director Plant, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to propose an amendment to this, and I will speak it slowly and trying to indicate for my colleagues around the table where it is placed. So if you look at what's on the screen now, it says the feasibility of locating a facility, et cetera, and I'm going to propose the following amendment, that the feasibility of locating facilities at either McLoughlin or Macaulay and Clover Point and a possible site to serve Colwood/Langford. If there's a seconder, I'll speak to why.
Second.
I'll read it again slowly for my colleagues, and I don't know if we have the means to, I guess because it's coming from
Thanks.
your...
Read it again, and then I'm going to make a ruling as to whether the amendment is in order or not. So I just want to listen really carefully.
Absolutely. Locating facilities at either McLoughlin or Macaulay Point and Clover Point and a possible site to serve Colwood/Langford.
Yes?
As a friendly amendment, I would like to suggest Director Plant's motion not specifically say Langford Colwood, but a site on the west side.
Absolutely.
Because there are other
Okay, so
possibilities.
thank you. So pretend Director Plant is still speaking. Try it one more time. And
Locating facilities at either McLoughlin or Macaulay and Clover Point and a possible site to serve the western communities. Thank you, Director Blackwell. West Shore, West Side, whatever is more politically appropriate today.
I am really struggling with whether to rule this in order or out of order. No one gets to speak on it and help me. That's my job. I'm going to rule it in order because what Director Jensen's original motion proposed was essentially the creation of another option set. I was going to ask when it was my turn to speak, I was going to ask Ms. Hutchison what the time implications would be of creating this new option set. So if Director Jensen's motion were simply to stick with the original plant proposed by HRP at McLoughlin, I would rule this amendment out of order. But given that Director Jensen's motion essentially is proposing a new option set that would need consideration by staff and consultants, I am going to rule the motion, or the amendment rather, in order. So does anyone wish to challenge my ruling before we proceed? Okay, thank you for letting me speak out loud about the rationale for my ruling it in order. There's an amendment on the table. It's been made by Director Plant, so he has the first opportunity to speak to it, and then as the seconder, Director Isaac has the second opportunity.
Hello, everybody. I guarantee I will not speak for 15 minutes, so I would ask...
I'm timing everybody.
Please do. If I speak for 15 minutes, I guarantee people will stop listening after 5. The comment I would like to make is I do not support the motion as it currently existed. It's looking backwards for a solution to anywhere but Rock Bay. Therefore, this motion I didn't like. The one that goes forward is to look at what is potentially out there. Therefore, even in the original motion, it said a second facility. We didn't know what that was. I'm suggesting that we make it clear that it's going to be one on the west, one on the east, where the outfalls are, and the possible out in the West Shore for that community as it grows forward. I acknowledge this may messy things right now because we would rather have just defeated this or got it to go away. But my amendment is based on my experience as a teacher who likes to build consensus. I couldn't support this. Those of you who want McLoughlin on the table, you wanted this. Those of us who probably didn't want McLoughlin on the table are willing to consider McLoughlin as part of a distributed, even if it's 2 or 3 sites going forward. All this does is give the mandate to staff to look at it. It'll come back. And to me, this is a better placeholder than what we're going to discuss later in the meeting. So my amendment is not meant to disrespect the potential of looking at McLoughlin, but ask you to look at it as part of a system, not just by itself. So please see that this is a way for us to all win going forward, to just look at this option. This is not to say I want to go build a site at McLoughlin and only potentially at the Clover Point. This is just to saying let's look at them both. Why just the one option? So I hope this amendment gets support so that we can get on to other items in our agenda today. Because I think if this amendment passes, it has something for everyone.
Thank you. Speakers on the amendment, I have Director Isaac, do you wish to speak as a seconder? And then I have Director Derman and Director Atwell.
I seconded this because I think it adds specificity to the original motion, which didn't propose a single site. It proposed at least 2 sites. Also, I think it provides a clearer path to giving direction to staff to revisit McLoughlin than relying essentially on the deciding vote of the mayor, which based on the 2 previous 8-8 votes, it was up in the air about what the mayor would have decided. And I think we owe it to taxpayers to have our staff and consultants and top tell us about what McLoughlin, as well as the other sites that sorry, Colin, that Director of Plant referenced. So I think, I think certainly it opens a whole can of worms in terms of Clover Point and proximity to residential households, but I think it's a discussion worth having. But I think really what we're asking for is a series of feasibility studies. People will read what they want into it, but a part of this reporting back, I think, needs to tell us about what current options are with respect to McLoughlin and the west side.
Thank you. I have Director Derman, Director Atwell, myself, and then Director Alto. Director Derman, go ahead, please. And again, I will, to Director Plants, thank you for making the amendment. It adds, every time we have an amendment, there's something new to debate, which is exactly why we're here, but I'll ask us if we can try and keep our comments as concise as possible to keep the agenda moving forward. Director Derman, your turn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First thing I would like to do is ask a question about the amendment, and the amendment clearly opens up the process to some degree. I'm wondering what the amendment does to the recommendations that put forward in 5.3. If we are already at this point saying we are going to look at other approaches, Director Plant talked about a distributed approach. That would be vastly different than a single plant, obviously. So I'm wondering if we do pass this, what happens to 5.3 and how do we adjust that?
I will take a, Ms. Hutchison, do you want to start or should I start? So what I would, well, it depends on if we're going to go with 5.3 recommendation 1 or recommendation 2. If the committee wants to put on the table and debate alternative number 2, this could, if this passes, this could be added as one of the options that would be looked at under alternative number 2, bullet 2, which is this wider process. So when it's my turn to speak, I'll add some hopefully motivating factors that will help you with your decision, but it's not my turn to speak right now. I'm just answering the question.
Thank you. If I could continue then. I think the amendment suggested is an improvement over where we were before, in that it somewhat opens up the process to look at options that might be less costly and that in that respect be better for the citizens of the region. I'm not sure it gets us to where I think we should ultimately be, and that is the ability to seek different options based on the goals and outcomes that we've already established. That's ultimately where I think we should go, because that's where I think we would get the best possible answers. However, I don't think I'm going to listen to others, but I don't think I'm going to oppose the amendment. I see it as a step in an appropriate direction. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Atwell next, please.
Thank you, Chair. For me, one of the things that guides my viewpoints and my direction of the last year and longer has been the direction that we get from the ministry itself. We haven't received a letter from the minister in a long time, or the ministry. And we can go very far back in time and cherry pick from material. But the direction that comes from the minister is essentially an order for us to proceed along a path, and then we provide a response, and hopefully we get to a point where we end up with an amendment. I was digging through some of the old directions from the minister, and there's a salient one here. And this dates back to 2003, and I realize it goes back quite far. But the minister of the time was Joyce Murray, and she was Minister of Water, Land, and Air Protection. And she issued 12 orders, and I'm going to read numbers 3 and 4 in reverse order. Number 4 was to immediately commence the process to acquire a site for the processing of sludge for future treatment works at Macaulay and Clover points. It was originally conceived by the ministry that these outfalls would be upgraded to provide treatment. It makes sense. It's something that has to be looked at, and we have to consider it. It has to be found technically feasible or not and ruled out so we can make a good decision. But it's a logical place to do something. If you can bury a pump station at Clover Point, you can bury a treatment plant. And there are many, many other options. And we've seen some of those come forward in conceptual proposals. The other direction that she gave was to immediately commence the pilot testing of treatment technology that will provide for primary or equivalent treatment for the removal of suspended solids consistent with the municipal sewage regulation. Again, we're at a stage where we can still follow this direction of figuring out what is the best technology. And I do believe that the technology informs the site selection more than the site informs the technology selection. And so while we are at a debate level where we are looking at sites, and we don't even have a representative technology, what we have is a representative design, as been described by the oversight panel. I don't believe that we can rule these sites off the table in order to prove once and for all that there's a cost-effective solution for the taxpayer that will eliminate the $200 million of piping to Rock Bay and any other site that's being considered. All of our decisions at this table should be made through the triple bottom line lens of weighing financial choices with environmental choices, with social choices. And I think for each of the options that have come forward to date, it's a bit of a toss-up. We don't have a good matrix. We don't have a good sense of what's better than the other. We've largely been focused on the cost. When we bring McLoughlin back into the mix and the exchange rates and other things, we actually don't know the cost. We do need to put some engineering resources behind this to figure out if we should proceed along these lines or include these in the mix. I think it would be incumbent on us to do this, and I think it's our fiduciary duty to do it. So I will support the amendment.
Thank you. My turn. I'll tell you my perspective. My perspective is that I saw Minister Sohi face-to-face in December, and he said to me, and I've conveyed this to you, and he's also conveyed this to us in a letter, we support this project, the funding is there, you need to make progress. So my perspective is that in the next 3 weeks, myself and our board chair will be getting on a plane to go to Ottawa before the federal budget to hopefully say something different and to show progress on this project since December. So I sincerely appreciate Director Plant's amendment, and I will support it. And I don't know what it means for 5.3 option 1 or 2, but I do know that and I said this in my chair's remarks, I do know that in order to move this project forward, we need to have a majority vote. So that is what each of us needs to consider. We need to have a majority vote. We need to show, right now the placeholder, everyone's talking about a placeholder, the placeholder is McLoughlin with a centralized plant. That is the placeholder. That is where we're at. And that's why we keep having these conversations about going back to McLoughlin. So I am prepared to support this, and I'm prepared to support the main motion as amended. And then we will need to have a very difficult conversation, presumably on Friday, about what is the new placeholder. Is it this option, or is it Rock Bay, or do we direct staff and consultants to cost this option? And the last options, it takes about 4 weeks to cost a new option to do the analysis. Now, some of that's been done because we've done a little bit of analysis on Clover and a lot of analysis on McLoughlin, so maybe it won't take that long. But what I know for certain is we need to take a step forward, and we need to land, we need to land somewhere. And I appreciate the comments about technology needs to be chosen before the site. That's fine. But liquid waste management plans aren't based on technologies. They're based on a combination of a technology and a site. And if we want to show our funders that we're serious, we need to move forward, decide on a location or locations, do this extra process, the RFSI, to get more technical input, and then put the two together. But we cannot leave ourselves and our funders hanging out in the air without landing this on a site or sites while we do the technology process. So that's strayed a little bit from this amendment, but what I'm going to communicate really clearly once again is that when we go to Ottawa before the federal budget, we need to show significant progress on this project, and maybe it's this amendment, maybe it's 5.3 option 1 or 2, but it has to be something. We can't sit around and talk about technologies versus sites versus technologies versus sites, or we'll have nothing to tell our funders. So I support this, and I appreciate the consensus building spirit of my colleague. And I have Director Alto next, and then Director Desjardins, and then Wergeland and Brownoff.
Well, thank you. And actually, the Chair's remarks are a good lead-in to just a couple of brief comments I wanted to make. I have to say I'm very torn on this particular amendment. I very much appreciate the intent, as I understand it, behind it, trying to seek consensus and also to keep options on the table. But I have to say it feels very much to me as if we're opening a door to start over. And once we open that door, I'm concerned that we're going to create an opportunity for us to perhaps lose our way a bit as we meander through new possibilities that actually we've thought about previously. And in the spirit of the Chair's remarks, I too think that it's utterly essential that we land somewhere before we are in a position where we start to compete with other municipalities who are further ahead than us for not just the P3 funding, but for all of the funding. When I think of Clover Point, I've always wondered whether Clover Point was a possibility in some kind of a program. And in fact, when Victoria brought forward a number of sites and put them on the table for consideration some months ago, Clover Point was one of them. And as I understood it, in the end, it was removed from our offerings because of the limitations of space. So I have to say that I'm not entirely sure exactly how I'm going to vote on this particular amendment, because I do appreciate the idea of trying to put some options on the table that will bring us closer together. But I also am very concerned that we're losing our focus and trying to do everything for everyone, and ultimately I don't believe that's going to lead us to a decision. So I'm just a little concerned about that. I wonder if I might just make one comment. I think that it's important for us to remember in this conversation that some time ago a remarkable thing happened, and that is the observation that I would make in the privilege that I've had in working with the First Nations in the last couple of years. We have an option on the table that is only here because our First Nations were generous enough to offer up a piece of land for our consideration. And I think that we need to remember that the relationship, certainly that I've observed that our First Nations have with their land, makes this an extraordinary offering that we shouldn't consider lightly or dismiss. We're looking at a piece of land in Rock Bay that looks kind of small and maybe is, in relation to current holdings, a small piece of First Nations land, but is really quite significant in how much it gives away. And I think we need to just keep that in the context of our conversation. We have an option before us that's only there because of our First Nations partners' generosity, and that for me, that's always an important context in which to think of all of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Desjardins, Alternate Director Wergelin, Director Brownoff, and Director Jensen on the amendment.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Director Alto for her comments regarding the properties brought forward. I'd like to make an amendment to the amendment, and it really is just to follow the charter process, and that is that any new sites that are brought forward are respectfully sent back to the councils in which municipality they are. So that's my amendment, is to send this back to those councils.
Okay, so send to, can we be specific? It's really Esquimalt and Victoria.
It's Esquimalt and Victoria. Now, there is the outstanding West Shore something or other,
Hopefully
which I
that's at a
assume
site.
is upstream of Esquimalt. And so I'm not sure that that's necessary because they're already in the books in some way, and it's not specific.
Okay, thank you. So that amendment has been moved and seconded.
Point of order?
Yes.
Would the chair just considering to see if there's opposition to the proposed amendment to the amendment, and it could become a part of the amendment?
No, what the chair will do is if it's, I'm ruling it as an amendment to the amendment, we can have a simple vote if there's no opposition. So does anyone wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Yes, Director Atwell.
Thank you. I don't think I can support this because I think that we have gone beyond the political decision-making to get to this point. I think we need to get it to a technical level, and then we can bring it back to this political body, and then we can maybe push it back to councils. I think the batting back and forth of this, I think, I don't think is necessary. I think we have enough in the original consultation process and the fulsome number of sites that were put forward to, I think, get us to this stage. I appreciate the concern for the process and for, I guess, representing and respecting the levels of, I guess we call the autonomous levels of government that we have here in the region. But I think we need to get some technical information in order to then give it back to council so they can actually have something to weigh in on. I think just the sites themselves, I think we've been through that phase. Thank you.
Okay, on the amendment to the amendment, Director Isaac.
Yeah, I agree with Director Atwell. I think the City of Victoria, particularly our staff, did some heavy lifting about what a meaningful engagement process looks like. We were thinking about that in respect to Rock Bay, but there's nothing actually site-specific about that process. And so I think that same process provides a framework for how residents living in proximity to Clover Point would be engaged. And if Esquimalt wanted to look at that process, that's a mechanism as well. So I don't support delay by asking councils in the abstract of this further engineering work whether or not they'd support a facility there. I personally don't agree in the principle of a municipal veto. There's mechanisms legally and otherwise how municipalities can fight with the regional government, including if Victoria residents told us to fight CRD and not putting a facility in Clover Point. There's a lot of processes in the Local Government Act and Community Charter to have that fight, and in the Wastewater Protection Regulation, and we'll go that route if we have to, but I think the Victoria framework of how to engage residents and how to try to get to yes gives more certainty than I think just flipping this to a political decision by the respective councils.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back to Director Desjardins on the amendment to the amendment, and then I will call. Okay, then I'll go to Director Young and Chief Thomas. Folks, what we're debating right now, just for clarity, is whether we send this to Esquimalt and Victoria councils. That's the debate. Yes, so Director Desjardins is next, and then Director Jensen, and then Director Young, and then Chief Thomas on the amendment to the amendment, noting, folks, that we could really get lost here. Director Desjardins.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to reiterate that it's my understanding that CloverPoint did come forward from Victoria, but McLoughlin did not. And for that reason, I think it's respectful to go back to Esquimalt Council. Not necessarily for a veto, but for Esquimalt Council to be able to have a discussion regarding sites coming forward in their municipality.
Thank you, Director Jensen.
I agree with Director Atwell and Isaac on this. One of the things that we mustn't lose sight of is whose responsibility at the end of the day is this decision. It's the CRDs. We have been given that legal obligation by the province and the mandate by the federal government to do something. It's not the individual communities. It is the CRD. And there should not be any veto as such as a result of that, because otherwise we continue to get into this problem. They don't have this issue in Vancouver, in the Metro Vancouver, because they have been given the legal right by the province, which we have not. They have been given the legal right to decide on sewage treatment, wherever they, as a metro, feel it's best in the interest of all their communities. We have, for some reason, historical perhaps, had that power withheld from us, which I think is inequitable. If we are given the responsibility to do this, surely we should have the power to do it. And to invite a veto, I think, is the wrong way to go. I agree with Atwell and Isaac. Thank you.
I would reiterate that it is
Thank you,
not
Director
necessarily a
Desjardins.
veto.
Sorry, Director Desjardins, thank you.
I think it's insulting to
Thank you,
just
Director
assume
Desjardins.
that.
Thank you. It's Director Young is next. And folks, we may have to have a recess if things get too heightened, but I'd really love to move forward from the amendment to the amendment. So, Director Young, go ahead.
I cannot support this. I think it's opposed to the very concept underlying the original motion, which is that we have to examine these options. You heard from the representative of the Community Association. You've heard from Victoria Council. We are prepared to look at this site with open minds, the site in Victoria. But I'm not assured that other municipalities are prepared to do the same. And we have to prepare for the eventuality that we do not find a host municipality, a willing host municipality, and that the province hands back to us the authority that they took away earlier, which is to make and implement a decision about sewage treatment.
Okay, thank you. I have Chief Thomas, Director Blackwell, and Director Brownoff on the amendment to the amendment. Chief, go ahead, please. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I guess you kind of alluded to the whole thing. This whole thing is getting lost. It's already lost. I think speaking to the amendment, we're going to be, somebody else will throw another amendment in there.
Thankfully, there's a limit of 2.
But, we came to this table looking, and we supported a single option. One plant, not 2 plants. And this one opens up the door for 2 plant, creating two plants in the east side, one in the east, one in the west. But we supported the single sewage treatment plant. So I can't support this motion here because we've already did our due diligence, and we've offered up our land, and that's where we want to see it at, down here, right behind me. And so I can't support the 2 amendments or the motion itself. I think we want to see the Sailor Sea cleaned up, because right now we can't access our sea resources because they're all contaminated. So that's why I can't. We got parachuted into this process here, at the committee level, and this is what I have to That's why I say what I have to say. You know, because we have traditional laws that are connected to all the water, the sea resources. And if we can't access those resources, if our next generations can't access those resources, you know, we're going to disappear. Then the plan will have succeeded. They would have got rid of all the Indian people. So this is why I can't support this whole thing. You know, we want to be part of the process. We want to be part of the solution, and that's why we offered up our lands over here, Esquimalt and Songhees. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Next, I have Director Blackwell on the amendment to the amendment, which is to refer this back to municipal councils of Victoria and Esquimalt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I seconded the motion because in respect of Esquimalt, but I'm convinced by the others who have spoken that it's a good idea just to move this motion along. And in the interim, there's no reason that Esquimalt Council can't decide to debate it at their own table, in spite of the fact that we don't have the engineering numbers. That option is open to them. So I won't support the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you. Director Brownoff, please, and then I will look to call the question on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep it short. I'm not going to support the amendment to the amendment. I expect, no one talks about Heartland, but that happens to be in the district of Saanich. I expect when we get there, we will have full public engagement around that site as well. So I think we just need to keep moving forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All of those in favor of the amendment to the refer this to Victoria and Esquimalt councils. Those in favor, please. Okay, Mr. Reams, are you counting?
I have 6 in favor, including the chair.
Thank you. Those opposed, please. Do I need to read out the people who are against?
Please.
So opposed are Jensen, Isett, Blackwell, Seaton, Atwell, Chief Thomas, alternate director Wergeland, Screech, Young, and Brownoff. The amendment to the amendment is defeated. We're back on the amendment. Let me go back to my speakers list on the amendment. Director Desjardins, you did still have the floor, and then I have Director Wergeland, Brownoff, and then back to Director Jensen for a second time on the amendment. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Director Jensen. Or Director Desjardins and Jensen, it's your first time on the amendment. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to ask the person that made the amendment, Director Plant, if his intention is that this fits within alternative 2, which means that we go out and seek innovative solutions for these sites and or others. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we can pull these two things together such that we don't go back on a process whereby we're going to get something that is going to provide us with numbers that are, again, going to show high costs because we haven't looked at the innovative solutions. I want to ensure that if this goes forward, it really does fit into, because I would love to see the NAPIT idea come forward in a more fulsome way. And to my mind, that's a more innovative solution. And I've heard from our top that they don't support that. So if we go back to them and they do exactly the same thing, we're going to end up in the same place. And I think that is not worthwhile.
Thank you. My suggestion as your chair would be that if this motion passes, that we, as a committee, figure out how, if it fits into item 5.3 once we get there, which likely won't be debated, which won't be debated until Friday. So that will give us all a little bit of time to think about, if this passes, how it fits into the process going forward. That would be my recommendation. Alternate Director Wergeland, Director Brownoff, Director Jensen on the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. I'm an alternate director for Director Bryce, and I want to be careful and respectful of what I do share, but I do have concerns, and I've shared it before. We are 8 to 10 years into the process, and we're still talking about this infamous unknown technology and sites that might be, could be out there somewhere. And I've shared it before, and when this motion came forward, I thought, here's a good motion that can build consensus. And no sooner had I thought it, and one of our directors indicated that they could probably support it, but they weren't sure this is really the direction we should be going. And in my mind, I'm not sure that director is on his own. I feel there's others in the same place. We can go down this road, but I still have my own idea of where I think it should go. And one of the biggest problems, and I do come by here every 6 months or so, and one of the biggest problems this committee faces is their inability to build any consensus. And we talked about a majority, and if what we call a majority is a 9-8 split, then we better wonder why we don't need to wonder why the community out there that we're doing all this public consultation with are so confused and mixed up. I really believe that as a committee, somehow in your own minds, you have to build consensus. It might not be your way, but somehow we and you have to move ahead. And at this point, I don't see it. I don't think we've moved that far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. On the amendment, please, I have Director Brownoff and then Director Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, one of the things we've always been challenged with this project from the very first planning for sewage treatment is costs. And it continues to be an issue, and our public has said it as the number one issue through the public process. I think that the issue, I want to thank Director Plant for trying to get some consensus, because I do believe that when we start down this path, we should be thinking that if we are at all looking at innovation as laid out in Alternative 2, Paragraph 2, I believe we need to have the opportunity for all sites that the CRD owns on the table. We know that cost reductions can happen if we are closer to the outfall. So I'm supporting the amendment, and I just want to end with this. In 1894, Clover Point Trunk Sewer and Outfall was built for the City of Victoria. In 1913, the second trunk sewer was added to service Oak Bay, Northeast Victoria, and parts of Saanich. And in 1919, the Northwest Trunk Sewer System was built to service parts of Esquimalt, Victoria, and Saanich. I hope that this committee can get on with moving forward for sewage treatment in this core area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Director Jensen to speak on the amendment, and then I would like to call the question on the amendment, and then hopefully on the motion as amended, so we can keep this meeting moving along. Director Jensen, that means unless there's another hand that goes up, the final word on the amendment goes to you, except that Director Desjardins next. Okay, go ahead. I'm trying my best.
Well, I could wait. You can call upon me later. I support the amendment for two reasons. One, it does clarify and expand on the phrase in conjunction with the second facility. But secondly, it aims really at the heart of why I brought the motion, and that is to ensure that the money we're spending that belongs to CRD residents is spent responsibly. Plain and simple, we have to keep an eye first and foremost on the taxpayers' money, and this addresses that point. I support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Desjardins, I'll attempt to make you the final word on the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. I just find myself in a difficult position and want to make some explanation. This is not a site that was brought, these are not sites that were brought forward by my council, and therefore I cannot support the amendment. But I do support the dialogue toward 5.3 and the intent, I think, that is trying to come out of this motion. So I will watch and look, and this will go back to Esquimalt Council as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor of the amendment, which is, and I've written it here, and if Mr. Reams has it written better, I'm just going to read it out. The amendment is to add the words of locating facilities at either McLoughlin or Macaulay Point and Clover Point, and a possible site to serve the Western communities. All those in favor of that? Those opposed? Opposed are Directors Desjardins, Chief Sam, and Chief Thomas. Okay. The amendment passes. Further discussion on the main motion as amended. Okay. Yeah, question from you? You'd like to, okay, so Director Blackwell would like to call the question, but Director Alto has a question. So I'm going to go to Director Alto, and then we'll look to call the question.
Sorry, I just want to clarify with what I understand the amendment that just passed. This does not exclude the other options that are already on the table, such as Rock Bay.
No,
Is
it
that
certainly
correct?
does not.
It just adds to what is there.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All of those in favor of this motion as it's been amended? Any opposed? Opposed are Directors Alto, Desjardins, Chief Sam, and Chief Thomas. The motion passes. Committee Director Blackwell just whispered in my ear, as she's wont to do, that lunch has arrived. Before anyone